No, should we pin Carsten? Let me pin Carsten.
Yeah, I've done that in the TOC channel.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so only if Carsten is joining. Oh, we can still have the discussion. We just don't have enough votes.
Yeah, I mean with three, I think we can get going. Let's see. So looks like the first thing on the agenda is quite a doozy. I'm going to ask that we take these in a slightly different order because I think we'll spend as much time as available talking about this top item. And the other items on the agenda seem to me to be relatively lightweight. Any objection to that?
Yeah, and also I think if I recall correctly, we kind of had this discussion in the past working group meeting. So I feel like I don't know, were you there, Mitch? I don't remember. I think John, you were there.
I've looked over the notes, but
Okay.
as far as I can tell, we didn't actually come to a decision at that meeting, right? We said
yeah,
we needed
but I don't feel comfortable having a discussion without Keith or Louis, given we already had a round of discussion. And I do think we reached some type of conclusion by pushing away the support for the classical Istio API in ambient. So yeah, I just don't feel like we have enough people for that discussion, given we already had a round of discussion too.
Okay. One concern I have is that we didn't have a quorum on June 9th or again on June 23rd. This will now be the third meeting in a row that we're saying we don't have a quorum for. We do need to be able to have these discussions.
Yeah, so one thing we could do is we just move this discussion to a working group meeting when we had the quorum. Because I think the working group tends to have the quorum a lot of times. Because I remember last time we had the discussion, there was at least 3 TOC members. Because sometimes the working group have time for this too.
I think we have 3 right now, don't we?
Yeah, but do we need more than 3? I mean, we can have the discussion. I just feel like Keith and Louis probably wants to be part of it too.
Yeah, I would really like that as well. Just difficult to schedule through the summer. Okay, well, let's start with something that I think will be very brief and probably not. We've already had Keith and Louis weigh in a decent deal on it. The 2025 TOC roadmap, we built this out in January, I think. It sat with steering for a long time, waiting for approval. It never did technically get approved by steering, but it's now July, so I feel like we can probably just publish it.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten any critical feedback from the steering members, I think, on it. So I've got the pull request there for you to look over. It's what was in the doc plus a concluding paragraph that I added. I don't think it says anything new. I did have a question of whether we should be calling this the 2025 roadmap or the 2026 roadmap, or how to put a title on this document since we are now in July.
Yeah, I think maybe calling 25, 26 is reasonable /
Okay.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. We already passed more than half of 2025.
Yeah. Okay, so 2025, 2026. I think other than that, it's just an FYI to other TOC members to take a final pass. Obviously, it'll need some approvals to get out on the blog, but hopefully we can get to that maybe this week. The next item up comes from Jackie about CNI race conditions. Jackie, do you want to introduce this topic?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, cool. Okay, sorry, I didn't finish writing it all up. Okay, so this has kind of been going on for, I mean, at this point, a couple months that we first had the report of this issue. Essentially, meshed pods being missed because the Istio CNI wasn't up and there was nothing blocking a pod from, coming up and being configured, and like especially on node reboot, not on node reboot, even if the Istio CNI was not ready. So some pods are not meshed that users are expecting to be meshed. So that's what that's the initial problem that we kind of set out to solve. The solution that we currently have and that we went with was an Istio owned CNI config. I've been working with a user who's been testing this out. They ran into an additional edge case, which I now have like a draft PR out to fix. But I think based on the discussion on the still open issue for this, I think there's even more edge cases because the scenarios we've been considering are node reboot primarily, but on node scaling, it's just own CNI config. Really, I don't believe that it solves the issue. If a CNI, if for whatever reason on node scaling a pod that's not the Istio CNI comes up first, and the Istio CNI hasn't rewritten the Istio the CNI config file, if it hasn't had a chance to rewrite that, then the pod's also not going to be included in the mesh, but users will anticipate it being included in the mesh. So yeah, there's the two kind of groups of scenarios, which is the node reboot and node scaling. The only option I think that I can see that provides more coverage is to introduce it in a init container. But again, that kind of more fundamentally breaks the kind of flow of ambient. But it offers the security that we claim and the guarantee that if you say your pod's going to be meshed, it will be meshed. So I think we have to balance that if we're going to make various security claims. You go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Sorry, I haven't read the entire issue. Do you know if the user had load cordon enabled in this case?
I don't remember.
I think it might be important in this case because I remember we raised this as an issue. John, correct me if I'm wrong, when we were trying to promote ambient.
There's two different issues. There's node reboot and node scaling. So node reboot has nothing to do with cordons. The node can reboot at any time. And that's the one that's much harder. The node scaling, there's a lot more options we have.
Okay, so with node reboot, they already had the cordon label, which is why the cordon may not help in this case, but the scale out could potentially help.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, I'm not as familiar with like the various options for scaling, but so yeah, the guy who's been primarily communicating on that issue, he just posted another thing sharing some more information. But yeah, if someone who's more familiar could take a look, that'd be great. But I guess generally I would like thoughts on which approach we want to take. If we want to have more of an absolute guarantee. I guess, John, if you're more familiar with the scaling options that we have, then perhaps this could solve the issue. But I don't know. There was another thread that Keith's been working on or responding to in Slack, where I think a user was saying that the IP tables were incorrectly assumed to be configured completely or properly, and ztunnel receives the configuration anyway. I haven't looked into that one, but I believe it was the Istio CNI that was doing that misread. But again, I haven't dug into that. But curious for your thoughts, John, or others, on whether you think...
Yeah, it seems like at this point there's no one-size-fits-all solution, unfortunately.
I don't think so.
I would like there to be, but this has been a problem that, parts of it are new to us, but parts of it we've been thinking about for like 4 years and still haven't come up with a solution, which probably means that there's not a great solution. I think there's stuff on the horizon on like the Kubernetes side that we could lean on a bit more maybe. But for now, I feel like maybe just having a variety of incomplete options is probably the best we can do, unless there's other options. Like I think adding an init container option probably makes sense. It kind of sucks, but if you want to be in the position where you're saying like, this is impacting me a lot, and a container adds, a second to my pod startup or whatever, and that's fine for me, then I think maybe it's a useful thing to have.
And would you say then that it makes sense I mean, I think I was initially, I'll keep the Istio CNI config. We'll try, or the Istio own CNI config, but I'm not sure long-term it makes sense to support both options, but it sounded like you were saying to support both, like an init container and Istio owned CNI config.
I don't know. What do you think? Did you see the named? I assume that you didn't see the named config as fully sufficient. I haven't read up on the most recent comments.
I mean, it doesn't solve. I mean, it's not going to solve the scaling issue. So again, if there's a easy way that we can say, but I mean, other than preventing scaling, that's. I mean, I guess that's not feasible for some users. That's if there's another option to solve the scaling issue, but no, it doesn't solve the scaling problem because it'll
Okay.
still
Yeah.
be the primary CNI that'll write the config, and then until Istio CNI comes up and modifies that config, so yeah, there'd be nothing that could
Yeah,
be
that makes
solved.
sense.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that's where I'm thinking that init containers covers more scenarios. And you know, at least we've written one before rather than an Istio own CNI config. But yeah, so I'm gonna be working on that. I might reach out, I might see if I need other folks to help me out with that, because I think we have to get this in for 127. Personally. So I think if there's anyone who wants to help on that effort, that'd be great. But I can kind of be leading that. But I don't think that Istio own CNI config, now that we've gotten more information, I don't think that's a sufficient solution.
Can I ask the vulnerability involved where there's effectively a mesh bypass?
Yeah.
Is that permanent for the pod that starts up before CNI does, or that triggers this race condition? Or is it temporary until the CNI catches up, so to speak?
It seems to be permanent. You'd have to restart the pod itself. Or the Istio CNI, I think. Yeah, it persists. It doesn't get caught even when the pod retries to restart on its own.
I wonder if there's a way to close that down to just be during the duration of the race condition. Have CNI detect pods that are labeled but are not properly redirected. Because it becomes less concerning if it's self-healing, right? If it's an intermittent, very brief thing, that's concerning, but not the end of the world. If it's permanently bypassing for the lifespan of that pod, it becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah, the current state is that the node reboots do have potential for permanent breaking, which we could fix. Like there are options to fix that. I think they're not easy options, which is why we haven't done it yet. But the node scaling should automatically repair.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong there, Jackie.
No, I think that's correct. But again, I think, Mitch, it's like, what are users willing to tolerate? I'm not sure they're gonna tolerate even like intermittent non-meshed traffic. That would be my guess. Is, you know, we can't say, oh, well, there'll be a period of this race condition, but eventually it'll heal. But I'm not sure I think users want more of a guarantee. If I've labeled it meshed, it's going to be meshed, or it's not going to be ready.
Okay. And I'm noticing very particular platforms being mentioned in the thread, like Bottle Rocket. Is this something that's only triggered by relatively niche solutions, or is it theoretically possible anywhere?
No, I can easily repro it myself.
Okay.
Kind.
Yeah, Bottle Rocket just has a minor thing that makes it slightly more challenging.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, basically there's like a couple files that are on the node, and in most cases one of them gets removed on node reboot, and in the Bottle Rocket case they both do. So, but you don't need them both to be removed to the issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, more niche. Okay, well, thanks everyone for the feedback here. I just want to get this solved for 127. So I'll share an update when I have one.
Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate it. I think the only thing left on the agenda is the sort of ambient parity, virtual service destination. Well, it's hard to summarize exactly what this topic is. Lynn, I heard a lot of hesitation around coming to any conclusions today.
No, actually, I thought there was some conclusion from last week's meeting. I'm pulling out the meeting so that we can update.
Oh, okay.
you. Let me pull out the meeting notes. So what I recall in that meeting is we don't recommend to support virtual service in ambient officially. And that's a decision people feel comfortable because we want to promote user to move to Gateway API. And initially, I think when Craig was looking at this, he was thinking, down the road, like say a year or two down the road, we want to promote ambient as the default. And then the fact that we don't support virtual service officially, he think it is a blocker for promote ambient to be the default mode in Istio. But based on the conversation in the meeting last week, I think people didn't view that as a blocker for promote ambient to be the default mode in Istio. There are discussion on we should definitely document this to be clear that you can use virtual service, but we're not going to promote it beyond alpha, which is what we document today. And there's no intention to promote it beyond alpha going forward. That was the conclusion I recall. I'm going to take a pause here, see if John, if you remember something different, or anybody else who was in the call from last Wednesday wants to weigh in. Okay, so
Yeah, I mean that seems right to me.
okay, cool. Yeah, so Mitch, there was
But there's a bunch of questions here though. I didn't see those. So we
Yeah.
should probably walk through each of those maybe.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
walk through the detail. I just want to make sure you understand there was no contention in the call on that overall decision.
Yeah, I think I can see a lot of that in the notes on the work group. I don't exactly see anything about not blocking on parity. I'll say for my part, I really don't see a future of ambient as default until we have something close to parity for 90% of use cases. And that's sort
Do
of
we
where
not think that we've met that bar of 90% of use case parity?
no,
Ignoring multi-cluster.
I wouldn't suggest that we've done that. No, like traffic mirroring
That's supported.
through Gateway API.
Yep. Gateway API has almost every single API we have. The only thing that's really missing is direct response. And there's one other one.
Source space label.
Fault injection. Source space label doesn't work in ambient virtual service either. So that one's kind of a freebie. But yes, for sidecar gateway. But I think here we're talking in the context of ambient. So yeah, it's just direct response and fault injection. Yeah. To be fair, like that means using some of the newer fields in Gateway API, some of which have not fully promoted to stable, but we do support them in Istio.
So timeout, retry, all are added, which is amazing.
Yeah, the recent ones that have been filled were timeouts, retries, cores, back in TLS, maybe a couple others. Back in TLS is on destinational, so that one doesn't really count, but.
Gotcha. So the document that's showing gaps between virtual service and HTTP route seems to show a few more. Regex rewrite. I'm not sure what delegate rules are. Rate limiting.
Okay, rate limiting is not a virtual service, so that one's wrong.
That's true. That's not
envoy filter, yeah.
Delegate is a very niche advanced feature, but I guess that one is true. I forgot about that one because it's not really I consider it in a different area virtual service mentally. What was the other one you said?
Let's
First
see.
one.
Well, there's a few that are like not important. I think like case insensitive matching. I would argue that we just don't need.
Oh yeah. It
Uh,
was a regex rewrite.
regex rewrite, JOT claim based routing.
JOT claim based routings, alpha, and virtual service. Okay, yeah, there is more than I thought. So, but of the kind of standard stable core VS features, it's a pretty small list at this point.
Okay.
That's true.
My argument is not that we have 100% parity, but it's that we do have 90% parity, I think.
Well, I'll say it does look like we have more parity than I thought. I was not aware of like CORE's policy making its way into HTTP route.
Yeah, there's been a decent amount of progress.
It's good to know.
Yeah, Michael was on the call on Wednesday. I think he's well aware of the gateway API support.
Okay. That sounds good. Some of the questions then like talk about like interop in terms of migration. If we have parity and we're going to make ambient the default, what does it look like for a sidecar user to move to that new default? I know that's in our roadmap. And that's something that I think, if I remember right, Solo and Microsoft both signed up for in terms of direction. But I know on the Microsoft side, we have only like just begun conversations about it. I don't know about on Solo side.
No, I don't think we've made much progress there.
Okay. Do we think that default makes sense without migration?
I honestly think we have a long way to go for default because I'm not seeing it happen this year because I think to be the default, we want to make sure we have a lot of user willing to say, hey, I'm using Ambient in production, right? I mean, I'm seeing more and more users, but I do think that's an important bar also.
Some more validation.
Yeah, the validation from the user, and then the issue Jackie was raising, that was a critical issue too, right? Who doesn't reboot their node? So I do think we have, I mean, it's good to understand where we are. As far as the default, I don't know. We can think about ambient user all come from sidecar. That's maybe today, but maybe 2 years from today, we're hoping to tackle the 90% of user we couldn't tackle with Istio sidecar, right? So if there's a lot of more user and brand new user, I don't see the interop migration has to be a concern or blocker for becoming the default for ambient.
Well, I guess when we talk about defaults, we're usually talking about like if you install Istio and don't set any particular flags to enable ambient, then you get ambient, right? That's what default means. So if you upgrade a sidecar-based installation and don't specify any flags, if that automatically installs ambient without any migration support, we have a problem, right?
Right. So in that case, I don't see that would be a blocker, right? Because we specifically target the default for the new user.
Oh, so this is a default only for new installs.
I think it could be, but I don't know that that has to be the case because like in either event, you opt in a specific namespace, right? And so hypothetically, you install the next version and you get ztunnel, and whether you choose to use it or not is up to you, right? If we do it that way, then migration seems like an obvious requirement. If we do it as new user, it's still quite nice to have migration for sure.
That's true.
But I don't know that it's a hard requirement.
Does Helm provide us a mechanism for only applying a new default to new installs versus upgrades?
Not a good one. There's some options, but
it seems like it violates the declarative kind of principle there.
Well, technically, their whole install API is imperative as well because you do like Helm install and then Helm upgrade. And so I think they actually expose whether it's an install or an upgrade. But most people just do Helm upgrade dash install. So then I think it's kind of becomes moot, or they just do Helm template and then you kind of lose the context. So there's not a reliable way to do it for sure.
Gotcha. Rajat has asked a question in the chat about CRD conversion, and I know that has at least a little bit come up in this list of questions with the ingress to gateway tooling. How far does that get users in terms of CRD conversion? Oh, wait, that's ingress to gateway, so that's not going to cover Istio
No, the
gateway,
naming
virtual
is
service,
it's
etc.
terrible. It's terrible name. It supports virtual service and converting them to HTTP routes.
Okay.
Yeah. How far does it get them? I don't know exactly how good it is. In theory, it looks at all your config and spits out the translated config, but I'm not sure, what percent of time that is actually what you wanted, and it's just run it and apply it and you're done.
Yeah. Well, and it does seem, one thing that we've not looked at here, while Envoy filters, we've said that we want to offer some degree of support for them in ambient. They're not yet supported. So that would also be, I think, something that we would need to get to.
Yeah, that's probably fair, especially in a recent survey, we had a lot of users said they are using Envoy filter.
Yes. Conversely, I'm seeing very few users not using Envoy filters. At least if they have a mature use case, say they've been using Istio actively for more than a year, keeping it up to date, etc.
Yeah, I'm hoping the reality is people using Envoy filter, they try to be more vocal because they have more issues. And some of the users who are not using Envoy filter because they are happy, they don't need to complain. So we don't actually see them often in the community.
Okay. I'll see if I can share some data on that. I haven't gone through what it would take to share that yet, but I'll say anecdotally, that's not been our observation.
Okay, yeah, we would love to see that.
Let's see, any other interesting topics in this question list? Let's go back here. Oh, that's interesting. Validation can't really do that. I think we've answered this one as no. Is that correct?
The classical resource, yeah, virtual service, yes.
Okay. H-bone support sidecars default on in 127. Do we know where H-bone and sidecars is as far as feature maturity goes? I've lost track of that one.
In feature maturity, I think it's there. Like you can run it, it's fine, and it works, and it's required for the interop. The reason why it hasn't been turned on is because it has major not major, but non-trivial performance issues.
Okay.
And then it has like the operational things as well around like network policy.
Oh yeah,
right.
the port number. So the thing is, it may not be very transparent to the user, and it may break user. So typically, you would want to turn it on maybe when you are looking at transition to ambient.
Yeah, almost like a migration mode
Yes.
that
So
you turn on to prepare to migrate.
So that's probably why we don't want to enable it in default unless we want to put ambient as the default, or maybe one will release before we want to put ambient as the default.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Now the question about experimental gateway API to use Istio in GA. I assume it's okay because that's what we recommend people to do for ambient, especially we don't intend to support the classical Istio API in ambient beyond alpha, right?
Yeah. Well, and what I'm interested in is making sure that we're progressing. The gateway API my perspective before this morning, before I realized these new things actually have been added in terms of Gateway API support, my perspective was that it had slowed pretty substantially. And I want to make sure that we're not slowing down ambient because of that. But if those APIs are progressing towards maturity at a healthy cadence, then I don't see why we wouldn't wait for those to promote before we move to default. If we move to default, obviously, like you said, Lynn, there's a few things that need to get done between now and then.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, any other questions we should go through?
That's everything I see. Wow, I did not expect this to have been a short conversation.
Well, it's nice, a lot of work already done. So
Yeah, it's always great when you find more work done than you expected. All right, well, unless there's other questions or comments, I think we can wrap for today.
yeah, sounds good.
All right, well, thanks everybody. We'll see you Wednesday. Oh, yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
bye.